This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So, yes. Any questions for me, guys? Anyone, any questions for me? I know that you have sent an email to me, Akshay, that about new-AZ database out here, right? What kind of a server are you creating? Like the SQL server that you're creating out there? Yeah, Azure SQL only, SQL Server only. But what edition of the server? Like, what is it? A basic server? Is it, let's say, something like a general purpose serverless application? What is basic? You try typing basic, and when you create a database under free, you're getting that particular. Do one thing. Can you just send me the code that you used to create the server, and then the code that you used to create a database? Did you send that to me? Yes, I'll just check that out and I'll respond back to you by the end of the day today. Okay. Yes. Anyone, any more questions that I can take before we can get started with today's session? All right. So, and yesterday I gave you all some assignment to read about something called as traffic manager in Azure. Did anyone do this? Anyone understood this particular concept called traffic manager? What is traffic manager in Azure and Azure? Yes, no, maybe. Anyone, guys? Did you all try to, let's say, read this out? Yes, no. Anyone? Not asking you questions on traffic manager, whether I'm asking you just yes or no. Yes. So, what do you understand by traffic managers then? Okay, Shiva Prasad, do you have a question? Yes. Does anyone have questions on this one, on something called traffic managers out here? Okay, looks like no one has questions, and I can move forward with this topic. Good with this one? Are we good with this? Then I won't cover this topic then. And you'll have to tell me, right, that you did not understand or you do not read it or something like that, isn't it? Connect to this again. Something close to load balancer. What did we do in a load balancer is that simple. The incoming traffic, we just split it across into our virtual machines, and we made sure that if one virtual machine is down, the other virtual machine is up and it's sending your traffic back again. Same thing for a load balancer as well. For a traffic manager as well. The same thing applies for a traffic manager, but I am applying a traffic manager not on a virtual machine right now. I'm applying a traffic manager on an Azure web app. You have a web app, so this is what you have. Let's say you have an Azure web app. Let's take that Azure web app service out here. Let's expand this a little. And let's say you created a web app out here telling this is ECS2. This web app in the background will have something called as an app service plan. And should the app service plan be in the same region as the web app? Yes, you cannot have the app service plan in a different region than the web app out here. So yes, great. App service plan is in the same region out here. And let's say that you have deployed a website out here. Let's say a very simple HTML page, which I as a user, I'm going ahead and accessing this particular page out here. So this is a simple HTML page. I as a user, I'm going ahead and accessing this particular HTML page. And in the background, I'm now telling that this app service plan is nothing but a virtual machine running in the background, nothing but a simple virtual machine which you don't have any control on. Let's say VM. Let's say it's nothing but a simple virtual machine that is running in the background as such. Now, this VM might be running out of a region. This VM might be running out of a region, and this VM might be running out of a data center in the background, like ECS2. Let's say this is a data center that you have, which is an ECS2 out here, and this VM might be allocated onto a physical server. So, just to let's say reiterate on my diagram, you have a web application on which you have deployed, let's say, something like a simple HTML page out here. This web app is running, let's say, on an app service plan, and app service plan is nothing but an abstraction of a backend running virtual machine which you do not have any control on. The reason you do not have any control on is because this is a platform as a service. So Microsoft will not really give you a control on out here. And this VM in the background is running nothing on, let's say, but a physical server out here. Now my question to you all is that, let's say that this physical server is not really available out here. Let's say because of a power outage, or let's say because of some kind of, let's say, issues that are running in the background. This physical server is not available, which means that the VM will not be available, which means that your app service plan will not be available. And so the same issue gets propagated to your app service as well. So your HTML application that is running is not available. For me, this is an issue for the end user, whoever is accessing your application. That end user will simply, kind of see a screen telling that server not available or something like that. And let's say if this is a critical application that is running, even 1 second of a downtime will cause you, let's say, millions of dollars in loss. That's the issue. So now my question is, then how do you protect yourself from this particular outage? Because right now, yes, availability set or availability zone, something like that. Good point. But my question is that, when you are creating a web application, which is an Azure web app, do you see a place where you can create availability set? Like for example, if I go back to the portal and if I go into my web application service, app service out here, I'll say create this out. And once I create this particular app service, I have couple of things like the subscription, the resource group, and then you have the app service name, the runtime stack, the publishing, and all that stuff. Do I anywhere see a place where I can go ahead and, let's say, tell that this is an availability set that where I want to place in? Yes, if it's a virtual machine, it's a different concept because it's an infrastructure as a service. And when you're doing an infrastructure as a service, then of course, yes, things kind of, let's say, change because you can control which, let's say, physical server it's actually getting allocated to. But in the case of app service, you cannot really do that. For which, what normally organizations do is that we go for something called as a DR scenario, disaster recovery. In case this particular app service is not available, I need some other app service to, let's say, go ahead and fetch the same request out here to that particular user. So same app service, let's say in a different region like North Europe, like North Europe out here. So it's a different region out here, like called North Europe. App service plan is different because once I change a region, you cannot use or you cannot reuse the same app service plan because app service plans are region specific. So you cannot have, let's say, the plan that is created in ECS2 to be used, let's say, or to be reused with an app service that is, let's say, created in North Europe out here. So a different region. But what I'm now telling is that deploy the same code or deploy the same application. So you have two different app services running in different regions out here. And now you are trying to configure something called disaster recovery, or in another terminology, I would say high availability. I would say high availability out here. Same thing that, let's say, we did earlier with a virtual machine. Like we had a virtual machine service, put a virtual machine, put a load balancer in front of it, made that particular virtual machine highly available out here. In the same way, I am now doing, let's say, two different web applications. And when I say two different web application, each and every web application will have its own FQDN, fully qualified domain name, right? So one web application will be called as XYZ at the rate Azure websites, sorry, XYZ.AzureWebsites.net. The other website will be called ABC.AzureWebsites.net. Two different domain names out here. Now, in order to handle this particular domain resolution, I get in one more component into place into my architecture known as a traffic manager. This is what a traffic manager really does. Again, traffic manager is no different from a load balancer. Both of them, let's say, try to do the same thing, but traffic manager is a platform as a service. You cannot do a NAT rule like you did in a load balancer. You cannot do all those things out here. But you can configure a list of effective rules out here called traffic manager policies. We call them as, sorry, we call them as a traffic manager routing method. You can configure something called as routing method to decide how exactly you can go ahead and divert your traffic, to which web application you can go ahead and divert your traffic, and so on and so forth. So let's do that. In order to do this particular demo, I will need two simple applications. So two web apps as described in the diagram. One web app ECS2, the other web app in North Europe. So these are the two things that we're going to create. So two different web applications or two different web apps out here. And I will configure some kind of a code out here. Let's say HTML, a simple HTML page that I want to configure on these two particular web applications. And I'll just put a very simple HTML page. Let's not do, let's say, use Visual Studio, deploy your code and all that stuff. Let's put a very simple let's put a very simple HTML page on top of it for our demo. So what I'll do, I'll just go back into my Azure portal. I'll say create a web app. This is where I am. And I'll say create a new resource group. I'll say this is EastUS2 resource group. I'm creating, let's say, a web application in a resource group called ECS2. Sorry, in a location called ECS2. I'm naming my resource group as ECS2 out here. Just scroll down. I'll say this is ECS2 web app, something like this. I'll just scroll down. I'll say code. I'll say .NET Core 3.1. Any code is okay. I'm just going ahead and taking something like a HTML page. I'll just scroll down, and then it's asking for the region. So it's now checking for the regions and all these things. So let's wait for a second. And once it finishes the query, I have a couple of regions out here. I'll pick up a region called ECS2. I'll just scroll down. I'll say plan. I'll say this is a demo plan U2 ECS2. I'll say okay. I'll just scroll down. And here the plan is, let's say, something like standard S1. I'll change this out and we'll start with something like a free plan out here. I'll say deployment. There is nothing here. I'm switching it on. I'll just disable this out, networking, and disable this out. Monitoring, I know that we are pending with monitoring out here. So I have a demo for that. So we'll do monitoring out here in a separate demo. So for now, I'll just disable the monitoring right now. I'll say review and create this out. So I'm now creating an app service that is running in a region called EastUS2. So this will end up creating me three things: a resource group, an app service plan that is, let's say, running in the region called ECS2, and then something known as the app service out here. Three things is something that I'm going ahead and creating out there. And let me change this color. So let's wait for a minute for these three things to be created. And this is ECS2. I will have to do the same thing for North Europe too. I have to, let's say, do the same thing for North Europe. So I will plan to create North Europe into a separate resource group, a separate app service plan, a separate app service, and then go ahead and finally create something called as a traffic manager. I will go and create something called as a traffic manager out here. So if I just scroll down, if you look at this one, it's created the deployment, both the web application and the plan. So let's go to the resource, and now I'm in the app service. And I'm also telling that for this demo, let's try out with a simple HTML page. Let's come with a simple HTML page. So what I'll do is, if I browse this application, it has a fully qualified domain name called ec2webapp.azurewebsites.net and so on and so forth. It's telling your web application is running, there is this content and all that stuff, default page. What I'll do is I'll go into the advanced tools, Kudu console. So I'm inside the Kudu console right now. And once I'm inside the Kudu console out here, let me go ahead into a folder called site, and inside that something called www root. Inside that I have a default page called hostingstart.html, which Azure is giving me right now. And because of that, I'm able to see all this content. So I'll go here, I'll just say PowerShell or CMD, whatever it is. And I'll just go click on this one. I'll say www root. I'll edit this out. And this is a default HTML page that Microsoft is giving me. I'll remove everything. I'll write my own HTML. So to write my own HTML again, I'm doing a H1, sorry, H1, and then it is closing that bracket, and between that, I'm saying hello from ECS2, and I'll say save this out. So all I did is, if you open this particular page, I have a H1, open close bracket H1 out here, and then finally there is a slash H1 out here, etc. Then it says hello from ECS2. I'll come here, restart my application once, and once this application is restarted, let me give it a minute so that the application can come online back again, and I'll refresh the screen. So same thing what I wrote it in the file is now being displayed onto this particular, let's say, web page. So anyone online or anyone any part of the world can just click this link, go to this particular page, and this will be displayed. In this place, I'm just telling this is a simple content out here. You can have anything. You can have your own HTML contents. You can have anything as such. You can have your own website out here as such up there. But for our demo, I'm just taking a simple line telling that this is my application. Great. The same thing I'll have to do for North Europe as well. So before this class started, I did the same thing for North Europe. So if you see, I created a resource group for North Europe because of the best interest of time. I created resource group. I created, let's say, app service. I created this one again. Let me put it, let me have the same configuration. The app service plan was in S1. I'll just take it back into, let's say, F1 out here. So I'm just putting the same configuration for both the services out here. Okay. And let me apply, okay, dating and fine, because always on is not allowed on this particular computer model. Okay, fine, not a problem. Fine, I'll address that later. But if I go here and if I just say browse, I'm saying hello from web app North Europe. So same content hosted on both of my applications, one running from, let's say, ECS to the other running from North Europe. So now I have two different links. If you see this, I have North Europe app service.azure websites.net. And if I go back into the East US2, I have something called East US2 web app.azure websites.net out here. So two things that I basically do have. Now this is where, in order to manage the request that is going to these two particular web applications, I will start by coming up with something known as a traffic manager profile. So I'll say I'll go for something called traffic manager profile out here. I'll say create one, and in here, right, I'll give a name to the traffic manager telling that this is a demo traffic manager ABC000, something like this, some random name. And as and when I gave it, do you see it has its own domain name called demo traffic manager dot traffic managers dot net. Then there is something very important called the routing method. There are different routing methods that are available for a traffic manager called performance weighted, priority, geographic, multi-value, subnet, and etc. What I'll do is that, let's see what are these routing methods, but I'll just select performance for now. I'll say, okay, fine, I want a performance routing methodology. We'll understand what is that. And I'll say the resource group, I can create it in any resource group. I'll say create. I'll say this is sample RG, or I'll say this is traffic manager RG to make it much more sensible. And say okay. And very important, do you see what is this asking for? Resource group location. Is it asking for the traffic manager location? Is it asking where you want to create the traffic manager, or is it just asking you the resource group location? Is this the resource group? I'll say create this out. I'll just say create this out. Again, very simple creation. You have the name, you have the routing method, you have the subscription, and then it's saying, okay, fine, no problem. You don't have to give me anything apart from that. Just give me all these details. I'll now go ahead and create something called as a traffic manager profile for you. So it's going ahead and doing the profile for me right now. And now it's saying deployment is in progress. It will take about a minute to go ahead and let's say deploy this out. So let's wait for a second, and now I'll go to the resource. Now, can anyone tell me, do you see anywhere in this particular page the location of a traffic manager? Then which location is this in? Where the resource group is hosted? Yes. Again, resource group is hosted in ECS2. So does it mean that the traffic manager is in ECS2? No, not really. Traffic manager doesn't have a location of its own. Traffic manager is a global resource. The biggest difference between a load balancer and a traffic manager is that traffic manager doesn't need to have a location. Load balancer needs to have a location. So in a load balancer, you are forced to, let's say, manage traffic. So if I put a load balancer in here, you are forced to manage traffic to virtual machines that are in the same region, VMs that are in the same region out here. These are VMs in the same region. So you are forced to divert the traffic only to VMs in the same region belonging to the same virtual network. Traffic manager doesn't need that. That's the reason it's a PaaS service. It's a completely pure PaaS service out here. So I'll say, okay, great. Traffic manager doesn't need a location out here and so on and so forth. But one thing that you need is that the second thing that you now do is that you create a traffic manager. Great. Do you need to attach these particular web applications to the traffic manager? Yes, we have to do that. That's how traffic manager will understand how to drive with the traffic. So in order to attach it, you need to go into something called as endpoints. Endpoints are nothing but all the destination, or let's say all the services where you want to divert the traffic really to. Again, if you want to divert the traffic to an Azure app service, very, very importantly, guys, the app service plan on which you're running your app service should support traffic managers. It should support traffic managers to do this. If you want to divert the traffic, the app service plan also has to support, let's say, something known as traffic managers out here. Again, if I go back into something called my portal out here and go into my app services, so I'll go into the EastUS2 app service. This EastUS2 app service is running on a plan called demo plan US East 2 F1 free. Sorry, F1 free. So if I just click on that one, and if I look at the features of this particular plan, so if I go into something called scale up app service plan, if I look at the features of this one, it says memory, storage. These are the only two that things that are supported. I will say see additional options. I'll go to something called production S1 traffic manager. This has to be enabled, meaning your plan should support traffic managers out here. This is not supported in dev test, which D1 you do not have it, B1 do not have it, B3 you do not have it. You do not have traffic manager support in dev testing out here. It's only production plans which go ahead and support something known as traffic manager out here. So I'll say, yes, I want S1. I'll apply this out. The same thing again. I will do it for my East US to North Europe plan as well. Again, let's see. I think I named it. Yes, this is ECS2, and this is now in, let's say, something like let's say S1. When I created North Europe, the plan by default was in S1 out here, so I do not have to change this. So this in S1. It's already there in S1 right now. So great. Now what I'll do is I'll go to my traffic manager. I'll go into the traffic manager right now, and there's something called as endpoints. Let's go to the endpoints. I'll say add endpoints, and now it's telling, okay, what kind of an endpoint would you like to add? There are three things that a traffic manager really supports. One is called as Azure endpoint, meaning services that are running in Azure. It can be a virtual machine, it can be an app service, it can be a load balancer. Traffic manager can handle all of them out here as such. Second thing is called as an external endpoint out here. Let's say that you have a lot of servers running in AWS. Your company has a lot of service running in something, a cloud called AWS out here. And in AWS, we call a virtual machine as an EC2 instance. It's called as an EC2 instance. If you want to divert traffic to external endpoints, meaning on-premise servers, AWS, GCP, whatever it is, you can also divert your traffic to external endpoints as well. Traffic manager supports this. Something known as nested. Nested, will see what nested really is about. For now, I'll say Azure endpoint because this is the, let's say, endpoint that I want to divert my traffic into. It's asking me for the name of the endpoint. I'll just give a sample name called endpoint one. I'm just giving a sample name called endpoint one out here. It's telling what is the target type. Saying, is it a cloud service? Is it an app service? Is it an app service slot? Is it a public IP address? In my case, what it is? App service. I say, yes, great. This is an app service. Now it's asking me what is your target app service. I have two things because these are the only two app service that I have. I'll say ECS2 as my first endpoint. I'll say add this out. So I'm adding the first endpoint, checking the endpoint and all these things. It's telling the endpoint location is in ECS2. I'll do the same thing. I'll say add Azure endpoint. Name of the endpoint is endpoint 2. I'm sorry. You don't have to give a custom header setting. You don't really have to do that. So you can leave it as blank. So this is endpoint 2. I'll say this is app service. I will say this is North Europe. I'll say add this out.